Hello, my name is Liz, a former fundamentalist Christian turned atheist. I wanted to be a martyr, and I almost did die for my faith, but it wasn't the way I wanted to. When I was a teen, I believed that God had revealed to me that I was called to be a missionary, specifically to the 1040 window. So the 1040 window is a term to refer to the region of the eastern hemisphere that is between 10 and 40 degrees north of the equator. It was an area that, at the time that the term was coined, had the highest level of socioeconomic challenges and the least access to the gospel. It was also viewed as one of the more dangerous places to be or go. And this is where I felt that I was called, and I was completely prepared to be a martyr, to die for my faith. And I felt that if my death helped bring even one person to know Jesus, that it was worth it. Now, my call to missions was something that I had had from an extremely young age, but this specific calling to the 1040 window occurred when I was a teen. When I was in college, I got to do a 1 month practice course in international development in Uganda, and then later on, I got to do a 2 month internship with a missionary in Indonesia. Indonesia is where I almost died, but I want to preface with that wasn't my first time of having some type of emergency while overseas. The first time was in Uganda when I had appendicitis and I was serving in this remote village and it started to get really bad, just pain wise. And so our teacher uh, came, picked me up. We went to this clinic that was for childhood encephalitis because it was the only thing nearby. We had to wait while they were on their tea break, and then after the tea break was over, the doctor examined me, determined it must be appendicitis, but that they didn't have the proper equipment there. And so my teacher decided it would be best to drive me to the international hospital, which was a 6 hour drive away. So I laid down in the back of a very bumpy truck and just prayed that my appendix wouldn't burst while I was in pain. The surgery went pretty smoothly, and 2 days later, I was back in the village. That professor still brags about me in classes, I guess, to this day. When I was in India, I actually had an intern who had had that teacher, and so when she found out that that was me, she was like, oh, she still tells that story, blah, 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 blah. So that was my first difficult time. Then in Indonesia, I got dengue fever and typhoid at the same time. Luckily, it coincided with us taking a 2 day boat trip from the island that I was on, Sumba, that the missionary worked at and had advised me that I shouldn't go to the doctor there because I was more likely to get sicker and then, infections if I went there. So luckily, we're headed on this 2 day boat trip to Bali. I was so sick the morning of the boat trip that I didn't realize I was sick. With dengue, you get this really high hallucinogenic fever, and I just remember being able to see all of these swirling, moving colors in the room, and I remember laying in bed and just whispering to myself, quiet, 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 because it was like my head inside was this loud, buzzing static. And so it didn't even cross my mind that I was ill because my brain was not functioning. And so I don't remember getting onto this boat I remember at one point feeling a bunch of very cold hands on me and people muttering very concerned sounding in Indonesian. And then the next thing I knew, I was in the hospital. And so the 2 days of very high fever, I don't really remember, but that is the most deadly part. And then for dengue, they tell you that you need to spend time in bed rest because if you don't, you'll relapse into the high fever and most likely die at that point because your body can't handle it. And so I nearly died in Indonesia. And I remember being annoyed because my thought was, uh, so, okay, so I get the symptoms mixed up because I had both at the same time. And so to me it was one experience. And so sometimes I forget which symptom is from which disease, but one of them gives you this full body rash that just looks like a bunch of red dots all over your skin, and it feels like little needles tickling you. And when you touch the skin or anything, comes in contact, it feels like those needles are being forced in. And so when I would open a bottle of water, it would feel like I was taking a serrated knife to my palm. It was so painful. And if I would get up to go to the bathroom, it would hurt so much to walk because the pain was the worst on the palms of my hand and the bottoms of my feet. And so I was in all this pain. I was extremely weak and I was upset because, God, I know I told you I was willing to die for my faith, but not like this. I laugh about it now, but it was a really difficult time for me because it was one of the first times I really started to question if I could do what I felt that God had called me to do. And I had this whole story and testimony about laying on the bed alone because all of the kids who I was teaching as part of this internship, they were out and about doing fun things in Bali with the missionary. And I was just in the house alone. I was laying on the bed listening to my iPod Touch, and I was listening to an album that I loved, but there was one song that I used to always skip. I was so tired and in so much pain that when the song came on, I couldn't skip it. I felt in that moment that that song was God speaking to me. And it's what kept me in the faith at that time. And I remember sharing that story and people finding it as a powerful testimony. I don't think it comes off that way now because I don't treat it with the same reverence and emotion. But yeah, I almost died for my faith in Indonesia. Fun, 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 fun. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. It really means a lot and I appreciate it.